The year is 2012. You're a high school student in a computer lab and wanted to goof off after finishing your work, or not bothering with it, depending from your perspective. The computers aren't the best machines around, and the internet speeds aren't ideal either, and you don't have many local things either, and time is running low in the block. So what do you do to pass the time? You head on over to armorgames.com to see what games are new. You don't notice anything, so you try another site, Congregate. This time you do realize something new. It's the sequel to Burrito Bison, known as Burrito Bison Revenge. As you've never played the original, you become interested, and quickly become hooked, playing it all across the period and when you get home. That experience is what many kids from the mid-2000s to the mid-2010s experienced as well. But how was this miracle of online gaming possible? This is thanks to a proliferation of web technologies which plugged into a browser. By installing these plugins, they allowed for snazzy advanced animated websites, web animations, and perhaps most famously, games. All on the internet from the browser itself. As a result, the simplicity of technologies such as Flash, Shockwave, Java, and others allowed for hundreds of thousands of works to be made and shared easily with the help of portals such as Newgrounds, Miniclip, Max Games, and many other sites. Suddenly, an aspiring bedroom developer no longer needed to go through a publisher or a retail distribution to get their work out there. They could just publish it on these portals, and it could become an instant hit, even with very abstract meta concepts or other things a publisher might be turned off from, or even if the developer had little to no coding experience beforehand, and in its peak years, even make a fair bit of change along the way. At the peak of web games from 2008 to roughly 2012, creations were getting millions of plays and views. It seems like nothing was stopping this technology from domination. But just a few short years after the peak though, web games dropped off dramatically in popularity, and it seemed that the once mighty web game dynasty was over, as many indie developers either stuck to mobile devices or a release on Steam. These negative feelings would only be justified when many software divisions, such as Adobe, Oracle, and Google, began plans to kill off browser plugins, leaving 20 plus years of works in the dust by the end of 2020. With the help of some ragtag enthusiasts and teams though, a large part of this past era has been preserved for future generations to experience. But you may ask, how did it get to this point? What caused the bubble to burst? And what was that time like? To answer these questions and more, we need to explore the history of the various technologies these bite-sized games powered, as well as getting a look behind the scenes on what the web game scene was like back in the day, and for some, the history and events of which can be quite shocking. Welcome to the history of web games. Jonathan Gay was a young high school programming prodigy. After a failed run in architecture as a teenager, he received an Apple II from his family. He was enamored with the software development cycle as he could see the results of his work, and wrote a Space Invaders clone in BASIC on the machine. Shortly after, he switched to Pascal and wrote a graphics editor for the computer, which he then entered it into his high school science fair. After scoring well in that event, he bought a Macintosh to work on that platform. As this was in that platform's infancy in 1984, Gay's dad brought him to a Macintosh users group in San Diego. It's from there where he met Charlie Jackson, another budding software engineer. Jackson wanted to start a Macintosh software development company, and he already owned the $10,000 Lisa development computer, a computer Gay heavily desired. Jackson figured Gay would be the right man for the job as he had little money to spend on employees, and Gay was certainly up to the task. Gay joined Silicon Beach Software, a company Jackson formed in late 1984, where Gay, still a high school senior at this point to his amazement, quickly began work on their first product, Airborne. The game became an early showcase of the Macintosh's power when it was first released in early 1985, thanks to its use of digitized sounds, one of the first games of its kind, as well as fluid animations for the time. The team from there got to work on its next product, which would be even more influential, and served as a killer app for the Mac platform in late 1986. Dark Castle. Written using 68K assembly with Pascal for its title screen and other small elements, the game proved to be a huge hit for the company, with its fluid graphics, penned by Mark Pierce, as well as its extensive use of digitized sound effects, working with voice actor Dick Knoll. After that, the team returned roughly a year later with Beyond Dark Castle, developed in 1987 and released in early 1988. Unfortunately for Mac gamers, this would prove to be Silicon Beach's last game, as the company also made far more lucrative productivity programs such as SuperPaint, which the company would focus on thanks to Gay's experience with graphics editors. The company would later be acquired by Aldus in 1990, and Gay would become a full-time employee of Silicon Beach after graduating college. From there, he created a new graphics editing program known as IntelliDraw, and after becoming a modest success, Gay realized it was time for him to start anew. As such, he, Jackson, and Michelle Walsh all left Aldus in late 1992 to form Futurewave Software on January 22, 1993. The two men, realizing that pen computing was fast becoming a promising market, thanks to the awards of Pen.os, a pen-oriented operating system developed by the Go Corporation, began working on that platform using EO Corporation's tablet computer. Their first program would be Smart Sketch, a vector-based graphics editing program using the pen extensively. Unfortunately, only months before Smart Sketch released in January 1994, Go was acquired by AT&T, which did not see a healthy future in pen computing, and was killed off mere months later, with Futurewave selling only a few copies of Smart Sketch along the way. Now, in order to get a breakthrough in the market, Futurewave ported Smart Sketch to Windows and the Mac in early 1995. Now in the competition of Macromedia's Freehand, which had acquired Aldus in 1994, Futurewave's distant ancestor, and Adobe's Illustrator programs, the product struggled to sell well. However, at this time, a little thing known as the internet was taking off, and Futurewave realized its immense potential, as suggested by some developers at the 1995 SIGGRAPH convention that summer. As a result, they got to work on modifying Smart Sketch with animation, with this version focusing more on web animations rather than just graphics, though it was still a big focus here. At first, for browser extensions, there was no unified API yet, only Java, another web technology we'll talk about later. Initially, performance was very slow, but Futurewave persisted, and in the fall, Netscape released a proper API for browser extensions, which clawed back much more performance. Initially, Futurewave planned to sell the product to another party as they needed capital urgently. After a product renamed the Future Splash Animator, they went to Adobe to sell the product. Unfortunately, Adobe would reject their offer, and after another failed bid to another company, Futurewave just decided to ship the product themselves, which they would do so in May 1996. At first, Future Splash Animator didn't do too hot, But they would gain their first major win in August with, of all people, Microsoft. The company was relaunching its MSN online service to be an online TV network and used FutureWave's software to design the interface and animations. After garnering Microsoft's approval, Disney would come to FutureWave to use Future Splash Animator for its Daily Blast program on their website, and then Fox came for its Simpsons site that fall. The Disney connection led Macromedia to start knocking on FutureWave's door for a merger offer in November, of which they would agree to do so in December. As a result, the company, by this point investing $500,000 into their products, would be merged into Macromedia, and Future Splash Animator would be rebranded as Macromedia Flash 1.0. Gay would remain at Macromedia to oversee the development of Flash as the Vice President of Engineering on the team, while Jackson left to form other ventures. Shortly after, Macromedia redesigned their website to reflect the Flash acquisition, making use of its technology for its interface. This began a wave of other sites redesigning their web pages with the interactivity of Flash, combined with its then small footprint, eventually even earning traditional animators' attention such as Gabacorp and John Kay. Version 2 of Flash released in June 1997. This version saw the addition of some new vectors, bitmaps, the library of assets, and the ability to tween, make in-betweens of, color changes in animations. Gay continued to oversee development on an active level, highly unusual for a vice president role. The release of Flash 2 led to another explosion of Flash content on the internet, with its new capabilities, including none other than a Pennsylvania man known as Tom Fulp. Fulp, a man who had started a magazine in 1991 relating to fans of the Neo Geo, launched an online site in July 1995 known as Newground Remix, an English translation of the words Neo and Geo plus Remix, initially as a hosting site for various things, such as Fulp's own games of Club Seal and Assassin, becoming enough for Fulp to make sequels to. At some point in 1998, he was introduced to Flash, and quickly became enamored with the technology, bringing it to his then secondary website, Teletubby Funland, along with a new homepage of his. Eventually, in 1999, he decided to merge both Newground Remix and Teletubby Funland into a unified Flash site known as Newgrounds, and partnered up with Trauma Entertainment, an independent film production studio, to serve as to keep the website afloat, along with Fulp integrating a real-time chat room and a message board into Newgrounds. Fulp continued to make Flash games in the years since, most prominently the controversial yet technically impressive Flash game Pico School in mid-1999, a game made in the wake of the Columbine High School shooting, where Pico must take out a Goth school shooter. Fulp used Flash 3, released in 1998, to make the game, using advanced features like a variable system, predating Flash's official addition of variables in Flash 4 in June 1999. As the popularity of Flash submissions were becoming more prominent on Newgrounds, Fulp made a section of the site known as the Portal to display Flash creations submitted to the site in mid-1999. This caused Newgrounds to explode in popularity, overwhelming the servers and Fulp's wildest dreams, and spawned a wave of copycat sites to form in the early 2000s, serving as the rise of the Flash portal. Sites like XGen Studios and AddictingGames.com made high-quality games of their own, like Defend Your Castle and Mini-Putt on their own sites, though they were often uploaded elsewhere. Back at Macromedia, Flash sales were booming, quickly catching up on their other web technology, Shockwave, and by now the web player component, the free portion which had spun off from the full creation-focused product for animators, was being distributed by every major browser and ISP with no extra downloads needed. Eventually, with Flash 4 being bundled with Windows XP for free when that launched in October 2001, using that component for its Tor program.
Welcome to Windows XP from Microsoft, the new version of Windows that brings your PC to life. Experience the best. Experience Windows XP.
And we haven't even reached Flash 5 yet, which released in August 2000, most prominently featuring a huge advancement in Flash's scripting capabilities known as ActiveScript, allowing for a full object-oriented program to exist in Flash, the once animation-oriented program. While bits and bobs of scripting had existed as early as Flash 2, this marked a huge leap forward for both programming novices and experts to take a crack at the program. By 2002, even major businesses such as PBS Kids, Cartoon Network, Disney, and Nickelodeon were using Flash for games, with them often also using Shockwave, to say nothing of its use on websites in general for its navigation and animations, which are growing all the time. Animators continue to be drawn to Flash for its intuitive and easy-to-use nature, and the popularity of Flash portals continue to grow, even past the .com bubble burst of 2000 and 2001, which killed many other sites in the progress, though some sites like Newgrounds still struggled, losing their Trauma partnership in 2003 as a result. Gay and the rest of the Flash team's work were still going strong with Flash 6's release in March 2002. This new version features support for two-way video playback and streaming, codenamed Tin Can by the developers, as well as the introduction of Flash Video, or FLV, along with new networking features and event support for ActiveScript, in addition to Flash's first branding update since 1996. Version 7 followed in October 2003, adding support for ActiveScript 2, which allowed for class-based inheritance and other new capabilities, in addition to CSS styling and the ability to run paid extensions and use authoring tools other than Flash's own, such as Breeze and Flex, for creations. This was also the final version to support the classic macOS and Windows 95, platforms that have been supported since the very beginning of Flash. As the program matured, high-quality free games continued to be made, such as Ultimate Sonic Flash, a Flash recreation of part of the then newly released Sonic Advance 2, and Bush Shootout, a satirical shooting gallery involving the then President of the US. The latter games showed that even sensitive topics like political issues could be explored at length, a topic rarely explored by mainline console and PC games at this point. And speaking of those types of games, some very successful Flash games were already starting to break into that front. Alien Hominoid, a Flash game released in August 2002, was ported and expanded in late 2004 for a full console release on the PS2, GameCube, and Xbox, and was ported elsewhere in later years. Flash games were beginning to get attention from awards organizations as well. 2005's N won awards in that year's Independent Games Festival, and award ceremonies for best individual Flash games were starting to form by the mid-2000s. By December 2005, Flash was now in its 8th major revision, now supporting GIFs and PNG images, new class libraries for ActiveScript 2, and filters such as blurring, among other things, and was well above 90% market share in browsers, beating even Macromedia's own Shockwave in that regard. Heck, even the site you're watching this on used Flash for its interface to stream videos in its earlier years when it launched in May 2005. It's around this point that Adobe, Macromedia's main rival, started to snoop around the company for an acquisition. Finally, on December 3rd, 2005, Macromedia was merged into Adobe for $3.4 billion. Much of the Flash team would remain at Adobe, but for Jonathan Gay, it would be the end of the line for his Flash work after 11 years of development. He left the company when the merger was announced in April 2005 for other ventures inside and out of the software industry. By the time of Adobe's acquisition of Macromedia, the browser plugin space had become a huge business, with many competing products fighting for attention for web developers. Let's take a look at some of the rival products Flash was fighting against, starting with Macromedia's own Shockwave. Shockwave began its life as VideoWorks under Macromind, a Chicago-based company in 1985 as a Macintosh-based program. It served animations for the black and white screens of the first models of the Macintosh. While primitive, it did its job well, and as such, Macromind made a second version in 1987, renaming the product to Director 1.0 a short time later. This new version integrated paint capabilities from other programs. Version 2 of Director would follow in 1989, introducing the Lingo scripting language, an object-oriented language that allowed for interactive elements, similar to Apple's own HyperCard at the time, as well as X-objects, a crucial part of the Lingo language. Afterwards, Director 3.0, released in the early 90s, added color support and extensions for Lingo, along with a Windows release. Shortly after, Macromind merged with Paracomp in 1991, and then with Authorware in 1992, all to form the unified company of Macromedia in late 1992 to early 1993. By this point, the multimedia industry was beginning to take off, with Director being a key program in its rise. Many prominent point-and-click CD-ROM adventure games use Director, such as the Journeyman Project and Total Distortion. It gained popularity from its extensibility and ease of use, along with its dual platform support. Even internationally, the software sold well, with Japanese artist Osamu Sato using Director for Eastern Mind, The Lost Souls of Tong Now. Later in 1994, Macromedia saw the rise of the internet, providing huge potential for interactive content, and so did Microsoft around this time. As a result, the two parties tried their hands at collaborating with an authoring platform known as Blackbird, an alternative to HTML rendering. The plan was for this to serve as a media-oriented web page design, as HTML scripting functionalities were not easily visible yet. Unfortunately, the partnership fell apart when web pages overwhelmingly used HTML, but the work Macromedia did for Blackbird would be recycled for the very first release of Shockwave, a Netscape-based plugin released in 1995. This plugin could play DCR files made in Macromedia Director, now on version 4, on a browser, after being compressed using their Afterburner program. While initial adoption was low, Intel would be a prominent early adopter of the Shockwave technology for their 25th anniversary of the microprocessor website in 1996, as with the game Garfield, Lasagna from Heaven that same year, becoming one of the earliest known web games to exist. Later that year, Shockwave and Director 5 would be released, introducing third-party plugin support known as the Extras, which allowed for more file support, desktop manipulations, PDF support, and other things. With capabilities like these, Shockwave remained a popular application for web apps in the late 90s. In December 1996, Macromedia acquired rival FutureWave Systems for their competing Flash product, integrating that program into the Macromedia portfolio. At first, Flash was seen as less of a deal than Director and Shockwave were due to its then lesser capabilities, and as such the team was bigger on the latter two products. Shockwave and Director 6 released in 1997, introducing the SWA audio format, a spin-off of the rising MP3 format with new headers, along with greater extra integrations and QuickTime 3 and Flash 2 support, with a minor upgrade of 6.5 releasing in 1998, integrating more extras. By this time, many websites were using Shockwave for interactive content, and Director continued to be a multimedia market darling. This was the final version based on the old VideoWorks codebase. Version 7, released in November 1998, marked a major turning point for Shockwave, serving as a massive rewrite of the rendering engines. This rewrite turned off some developers from the product, but was a big leap forward in terms of technology. By this point, Cartoon Network was interested in using Shockwave for some of its games, starting with its game Scrappy Stinks in 1999, which would expand rapidly across its show's websites in the late 90s and into the early 2000s. Thanks to Shockwave's advanced capabilities, more complex web games used that plugin compared to the lighter weight and less capable Flash. However, Flash began to gain on Shockwave's popularity and capabilities starting in 1999 and 2000, thanks to a smaller footprint important in the days before broadband, and bundle deals, with some of the Shockwave team being moved to Flash. Regardless, the next version came out in 2000, serving as a minor upgrade from version 7 with Flash 5 integration. However, the incremental update in 2001, 8.5, added far more capabilities, most prominently 3D and havoc physics support, along with real-time video and audio streaming, thanks to support for Intel's 3D technologies. This gave Shockwave a large feature boost from Flash at the time, and prominent portals of Shockwave content, such as Miniclip and Shockwave.com, showcase these 3D environments extensively. In addition, major websites like PBS Kids and Nickelodeon use Shockwave, in addition to Flash, for its games relating to their shows, as well as continuing partner Cartoon Network. Shockwave was definitely no slouch by this point, with 200 million downloads by the end of 2001. The next year marked a major version, 9.0, aka MX, now featuring macOS 10 support and enhanced server capabilities, along with new debugging and accessibility features. Some viral hits like FFX Runner, which even received an HD remaster, spreaded around this time. Unfortunately for Shockwave, Flash was rapidly overtaking it in terms of popularity, thanks to its expanding feature set, smaller footprint, and fall of the multimedia market around this time, in favor of web applications, of which Flash remained a universal tool for. Despite this, some sites continued to use both, with Director and Shockwave 10 arriving in 2004. This version featured enhanced DVD-ROM support, along with more enhancements of the interface, and was the last version to support the classic macOS, a platform supported since the original VideoWorks program. By this point, however, much of the attention went to Flash at Macromedia, leaving Director and Shockwave in the dust with a skeleton team compared to Flash. Adobe acquired Macromedia in December 2005, making Director and Shockwave Adobe products in the process. Adobe would ignore these products for some time, focusing on Flash instead as their golden boy product for web applications. However, in March 2008, a new version would finally be released from Adobe, adding numerous enhancements to Shockwave, such as PhysX support, 3D enhancements to DirectX 9, and integrations to various media players, along with Intel Mac support. Developers largely ignored this version, however, due to minimal changes in its scripting language, as its significantly shrunken market share from its early 2000s peak can attest to. Incremental updates for Director and Shockwave 11 arrived from 2009 to 2011, adding 5.1 surround audio support, H.264 video playback, enhanced audio mixing, and new importing options, before a true version 12 arrived in February 2013. This version supported exporting to iOS applications and featured other improvements, bringing it in line to the standards of a proper 2010s application. However, Shockwave's market share never recovered, being relegated to life support by Adobe once Flash became the new standard of the internet's content in the mid-2000s onward. With the fading out of Shockwave in favor of Flash, it was Adobe's golden child product in terms of web design and games. But Adobe was not alone in this market. For much of Flash and Shockwave life, there was competition in the web browser plugin space, the most prominent of which was a program known as Java. The Java story goes back to December 1990 at Sun Microsystems. After frustrations involving Sun's internal C and C++ APIs, engineer Patrick Naughton sought out an alternative language to these, which began the Stealth project, quickly renamed to the Green project after the addition of other designers at Sun, such as James Gosling, to the project, forming their own offices. While initially considering C++, the team rejected the offer after its many shortcomings at that time, like a lack of garbage collection portability, among other shortcomings. While Gosling tried to modify C++ at first, this never quite panned out. In 1991, the team decided to create a new platform known as Green, with the language known as Oak, named after Gosling's tree outside his office. By mid-1992, parts of the Green program like Oak could be demonstrated, which was later expanded on by September, with a full demonstration of the platform on a PDA device named Star 7, featuring a graphical interface and an agent known as Duke that would assist folks out. Duke would later become the mascot for Java. This rush of success led them to spin off the team into First Person, still under Sun. First Person initially meant to focus on interactive devices like the Star 7 prototype, but when Time Warner came knocking at their door for a set-top box using their technology, they quickly changed gears. Oak would be used for their projects, envisioning a fully interactive interface and content. Unfortunately, due to the cable industry not liking the high level of control the user got with Oak, they turned to SGI for their set-top box offer. After more failed opportunities within the television industry, Sun rolled First Person back into Sun proper in early 1994. It's around this point that the World Wide Web had begun its early ascent, and after some thinking in the summer of 1994, Gosling and the Oak team decided to repurpose the platform for the World Wide Web. Sensing the immense interactivity they tried out for cable TV, with browsers like Mosaic showing that potential, after a renaming of Oak to Java, due to a trademark already existing at the time, Naughton wrote a browser known as WebRunner, after the movie Blade Runner, forked from the Mosaic codebase. This browser was implemented entirely in Java, being the first to run Java applets. What made Java stand out from other languages at the time was the use of the Java Virtual Machine, or JVM, allowing developers to essentially compile their Java programs once, and then it would run on every platform going, from Windows to Unix to Mac OS. As long as a JVM was installed, some very advanced programs for their day could be run on browsers, with the applets filling in the gaps that HTML did not feature at the time, like mouse input and visualization, though they did not interact with the page's content itself that much. It also allowed for sandboxing, an abstraction layer preventing applets from accessing local information the computer had. All of these technical showcases made it a prime target for web designers, and as such, Java was demonstrated at the Technology Entertainment Design Conference in 1995 with the browser, now named Hot Java. Luckily for users, the Java technology wouldn't be exclusive to Hot Java for long, as Mark Andreessen of Netscape announced that their browsers would support Java as well, much to the surprise of the press of the day. Beta editions of Java would release across 1995, starting in May. Eventually, with Sun forming a JavaSoft group to develop Java as a result of its early buzz on January 9th, 1996. Finally, on January 23rd, 1996, the first official version of Java was released. In terms of capabilities, it proved to be quite extensive even in 1996. Though as time marched on into the late 90s and early 2000s, the base and capabilities grew over time, adding event models, more APIs, a just-in-time compiler, new forms of expressions, among other such features. Eventually, Hot Java would release on its own in March 1997, but proved to be sluggish compared to competing browsers like the aforementioned Netscape along with Internet Explorer, though its modularity was praised. In terms of what the applets did for games though? Well, admittingly, not a whole lot, as Shockwave was regarded as a much better fit for web games at the time. Despite this, its portability was a strong fit for some of the more obscure platforms at the time, and some major companies did release games making use of Java. One early example is promotional material for Jurassic Park: The Ride in 1996, showing off its capabilities for 3D graphics for browsers in an era where even mainstream consoles were just getting to grips with 3D graphics. More examples include PopCap and Gamehouse's web demos of their PC games, closely resembling their full PC counterparts nicely. Where Java thrived the most was in the simulation world. where educational institutions made heavy use of Java applets to demonstrate simulations of various concepts in a 3D form. Sometimes these were powered by back-end Java server work as well, though also aided with the access to a computer's GPU, which few plugins had at the time. Perhaps the best demonstration of its capability for simulation is the famous Powder game by Danball in the late 2000s, and its various clones, sometimes referred to as Hell of Sand. It allowed for real-time particle manipulation of the various elements, and fast became an addicting thing to do in this era, even getting a few fan-made creations for it. However, Java applets will remain third string to Macromedia's twin Shockwave and Flash technologies for most of its life, with few if any web game portals solely dedicated to Java, though a few multi-technology portals like andyslife.org did accept applets that were games, though Java excelled in other use cases such as its use on embedded devices, most prominently as a key component of Blu-ray players for its interactivity, as well as its use on various servers around the world. It also remained a solid first language to learn thanks to its write once, run everywhere strategy for novice programmers. While Java continues to be championed in server development and other various applications, the applets came increasingly under fire by the press for being security and resource hogs, and initial performance was also sluggish until Hotspot's JIT compilation came in with Java SE 1.3 in 2000. Due to a number of security issues that Sun, and later owners Oracle, who bought Sun in January 2010, either failed to address or not properly disclose in updates, they underwent even more scrutiny, as some of the sandboxing methods Java used regularly found security exploits. As such, the market share for Java web pages began to decline starting in the late 2000s, as Flash had taken over much of the interactive browser space by that time, and was later superseded by HTML5 and other web standards in the early 2010s, including JavaScript, a largely unrelated language connected by way of branding. Oracle continued to support Java in its original form with the applets, however, even with the releases of Java SE 7 in July 2011 and Java SE 8 in March 2014. The release of the latter, however, marked the end of an era. Starting with a rapid release model in 2017, SE 8 was designated as a long-term support release, with SE 9's release that September not being designated as one. However, Java SE 9 decided to deprecate the applets, but not removing them entirely. But the next version of the LTS program, Java SE 11, released in September 2018, marked a full removal of the applet support, making Java SE 8 the last remaining version to support the applets. However, many browsers had already removed support for the applets along with other web plugins a few years beforehand, making this a final send-off from Oracle themselves. Java SE 8 ended commercial support in January 2019, while personal use updates were planned until the end of April 2020. However, these plans were delayed in early 2020, and as such, SE 8 will continue to receive updates for the foreseeable future, though for how long remains a mystery. While it marks the end of the original purpose of Java to provide interactive content for the web, it left behind a 25-year legacy of serving as the genesis for portability and web plugin design. And of course, it continues to be used for Minecraft and other various purposes, continuing Naughton and Gosling's vision of a one-size-fits-all portable platform they envisioned in the early 90s. Java, Macromedia, and Flash, however, were not alone in the web app market. Microsoft, who had fought Sun twice in 1997 and 2002 in court over implementations of the JVM and Windows, decided to join the web app market with two products in the 90s and 2000s, ActiveX, a largely singular platform plugin built for Internet Explorer, and Silverlight, a more ambitious interactive multimedia plugin. Let's take a look at the troubled times of these plugins. Microsoft began work on a framework to link and embed things into objects such as documents in 1990 with, well, object linking and embedding. First appearing in Windows 3.1 a couple years later, it marked a step up from the company's Dynamic Data Exchange introduced in 1987 with Windows 2.0 that allowed processes to work alongside each other. Version 2 of OLE was introduced in 1993 as part of the Component Object Model, or COM, a key component of almost all of Microsoft's later projects. However, some less experienced developers were overwhelmed coding with OLE 2.0, which was said to be quite complex for its time. As a result, Microsoft sought to simplify the OLE API for these developers, and in March 1996 released the results of their work in the form of ActiveX. This new framework allowed for embedded content into various programs on a network in various programs, especially things from the World Wide Web, which was fast becoming a hot venue at the time. Many IDEs would start implementing ways to add ActiveX controls to products even outside of Microsoft, and as such the company positioned it to be a competitor to Java's web-based applets at the time, with performance comparable to those applets along with an easier time programming, with Microsoft saying the framework was supposedly compatible across multiple platforms. Despite this, developers initially still struggled with ActiveX's complexities, which led Microsoft to introduce wizards and various extensions to help make such controls possible. What would be a bigger problem would be the claimed multi-platform compatibility, which turned out to be effectively a twisting of words by the company. Due to the nature of the controls often being coded in C or C++ and containing compiled x86 instructions, this made them only work on Windows due to using its APIs for calls to the controls. Microsoft did attempt to push ActiveX on other platforms, with a beta for Mac released by them in October 1996, and planned Solar support later. These never fully happened, and as such ActiveX remained largely a Windows-exclusive technology used in Internet Explorer, which ActiveX started to appear in the third version of that browser, released in August 1996. Web developer attraction was slow initially, but did garner some attention from some software houses and hobbyists. Over the next few versions of Internet Explorer, the ActiveX family of applications evolved, eventually encompassing web page scripting, editing of Office documents inside the browser, the container component for video and audio streaming, most prominently this contained the WMA and WMV formats, and server-side scripting, all of which were components of the ActiveX library. However, the most visible component, the browser controls, proved to be controversial since the genesis of ActiveX, due to a system and authentication entrusted developers needing to pay a fee in exchange for a promise not to develop malware, which would then take the code and run it with full permissions on the browser end. Security became a major problem since even as simple as a minor bug could prove to be an exploit for the plugin, and as such many security patches became the norm for ActiveX. Compare this to the sandbox nature of Java's applets and other plugins, which had significantly less security issues thanks to their isolated environments. As such, adoption of ActiveX remained minimal throughout the 90s and 2000s, but was picked up by some government agencies like South Korea, as well as corporate intranets that used Internet Explorer for many years. Browser support would remain mostly limited to IE, but some browsers like Netscape Navigator and Firefox would provide ActiveX-capable plugins for their browsers, albeit in a somewhat incomplete state. On the public side, ActiveX was mostly relegated to demos of PC shareware games from the 2000s, such as many play-first releases like Diner Dash or Raptorsoft's releases such as Hamster Ball, which often showed off the capabilities of ActiveX's potential, coming close to their full PC counterparts. ActiveX was also used in universities for web application experiments. However, these remain limited to a small market compared to Microsoft's original ambitions, and by the time Flash took off in popularity and IE's market share began to fall in the late 2000s, it seemed ActiveX had all but been forgotten, but Microsoft did not give up on the browser plugin market with ActiveX's fall. In 2007, they had another trick up their sleeves with the introduction of Microsoft Silverlight, a much more advanced plugin than ActiveX ever was, it allowed to run far more rich applications, getting to the standards comparable to Flash, if not beating them in some workloads like video streaming, using XAML with .NET to create advanced web apps. That got the attention of major services like Netflix and Amazon Video, which decided to use Silverlight for their streaming platforms, as did both the Olympics of 2008 and 2010. Suffice to say, Silverlight looked like a surefire hit. The plugin avoided a lot of the mistakes that plagued ActiveX, such as having a greater emphasis on cross-platform compatibility by actually having a Mac version this time, along with no requirement of any Windows components compared to the heavily x86 Windows-oriented ActiveX suite. In addition, the plugin was not just supported on IE, but on Firefox and Chrome too, only increasing Silverlight's share. Oh, and Silverlight was used to make some of the Windows Vista gadgets as well. Within the gaming space though, usage of Silverlight in games remained minimal, as Flash by this point was the undisputed king in this field. However, a few notable Silverlight games were still made. Intriguingly, a Silverlight version of Flash hit, Line Rider, was made in the wake of the Flash version's success, featuring extra features not in the original, such as an erase tool, though this would be merged back into the original game. A small amount of tech demos would also exist for Silverlight, such as a space shooter and a Pac-Man clone. Casual games such as Brain App, later turned into a mobile app apparently, and Puzzle Touch, exactly as it sounds, also existed, and likely became one of Silverlight's most popular games. However, the Tetris company did make use of the technology to make Tetris Stardust, an official Japanese exclusive web game. However, the real juicy showcase arguably belongs to this. SilvOS, a fully featured operating system inside of a web browser, with the interface very much resembling Windows 7, the contemporary OS at the time, as well as full file support with your local machine. It's a genuinely impressive piece of work for the technology. Granted, many components don't exactly work many years later, but hey, this was still great stuff. Unfortunately, as you can deduce from Silverlight's obscurity today, the plugin did not have long for this world after the initial momentum faded. Silverlight had 5 major versions, with the 5th and final version arriving in May 2012. Microsoft would shift focus away from Silverlight the previous year, as Flash remained a mainstay of the web despite its best efforts. And speaking of Flash, it's high time we check back on them, as they've grown a lot with their new owners. The year is now 2006, and many things had changed within the Flash team. With Flash lead Jonathan Gay out of the picture, it was a new era for the program, with Adobe heads overseeing the new team of 40 to 50 members, mostly coming from Shockwave's old team. Luckily by now, over 90% of browsers were using Flash, and there was a loyal audience of web designers ready for what the new management in charge had to offer in this era. Not to mention professional animators, as many shows were using Flash by now, though by this point it was largely a different product than the Flash Player product for web apps. And for what the Flash team had in store for those people, well, they certainly didn't disappoint. After a short transitional period with Flash 8 receiving a minor update in April, Flash Player 9 was released in June 2006 as the first version under the Adobe name. With this new version came big updates. Binary sockets were now supported, regular expressions and namespaces were now available, a new way to parse XML documents was added, but the real meat came with the introduction of ActionScript 3. As part of a new virtual machine component known as ActionScript Virtual Machine 2, or AVM2, with AVM1 existing for legacy content as well. Featuring new just-in-time compilation in AVM2, this allowed for a big performance increase on some systems. This marked a massive leap forward for Flash games to expand in capabilities, and by this point was morphing into a big business. The Flash web game scene by this point had become a massive phenomenon, with some highly popular viral games even beginning to be sold off for large amounts of money for developers, with a few games as high as $50,000. Naturally, this brought greedy individuals seeking to get a quick buck when the monetization of Flash portals, and now including places such as Nitro, Armor Games, and Max Games, began to take form. As such, a few shadier websites began to steal developers' Flash games in order to get the ad money from traffic. This greatly concerned not just the developers of these games, but surprisingly, even the fans of these games, often alerting them to a game being stolen, with some even offering to help out. While attempts to assuage the stealing did exist for affected developers with no or little revenue, such as sponsorships, the effectiveness was limited as these and the developers' references could easily be stripped out from the files, and the payout remained rather low with many deals. Luckily, the inception of Macromedia in 2006, a way to display in-game ads while loading, and Flash game licensing in 2007, an open auction site for web game rights being sold, marked a return of the balance towards developers in the later part of the decade. While stealing would remain a problem even past the introduction of these services, as demonstrated by a beta release of Pirate Launch being stolen in 2008 before an improved final version released in 2009 on Armor Games, greater revenue would be ensured for these developers as compensation. Gradual updates for Flash Player 9 released across 2006 and 2007, adding H.264 encoding support and AAC audio support, a reworked FLV format now based on ISO, along with support for other ISO formats, and integration with Adobe's Creative Suite 3, released in early 2007, and also served as the final version to run on Windows 98. Flash Player 10, codenamed Astro, released in October 2008, bringing with it further refined bitmap support, custom filters powered by Adobe's Pixel Filter, which was hardware accelerated, a first for Flash, anti-aliasing, a new audio codec, the real-time media flow protocol allowing for encrypted flow of Flash content, and perhaps most prominently, the beginnings of proper 3D support for Flash, a feature which only Shockwave had excelled at by this point. By the end of 2009, Flash had become all but a necessity to browse the internet, with almost every major site using it in some capacity, and many Flash portals entered the Alexa Top 1000 sites, with Miniclip being the highest at number 252 and 130 million sessions worldwide monthly. Other sites like Addicting Games and Congregate were also in or right around the top 1000, with at least 20 million sessions monthly. The licensing deals got stronger too, with Flash game licensing getting as high as $100,000 offers on particularly popular Flash games. In addition, some developers as young as their mid-teens were getting millions of hits on games, only further improving on their skills as competition was very intense, with short development cycles of less than a few months encouraged due to the rapid rate of evolution in Flash game presentation and features. With a Flash game convention starting in 2011, Adobe knew this very well, releasing Flash Player 10.1 in June 2010, introducing a much more robust garbage collection and memory management, added support for multi-touch APIs like a touchscreen, support for various browser privacy modes, among other things like more hardware accelerated components. 10.2 followed in February 2011, allowing for custom cursors to be used for the first time, along with a fully accelerated video encoding pipeline, at the cost of PowerPC support on Macs. And then came 10.3 in May, which added measurement tools for videos and introduced a control panel, among other features. However, a full new version hadn't been released in almost 3 years. This was rectified with Flash Player 11 that October, with a big introduction: fully 3D accelerated graphics, known as Stage 3D. This marked a huge jump in 3D content in Flash, as previous implementations were software-based. Other changes include a native 64-bit version, an uncapping of bitmap size limits, fully hardware-accelerated video playback, among other things. More features were added in 9 updates to Flash Player 11 across 2011 to 2013, such as mouse lock content, advanced sandboxing, more hardware support for stage 3D content, full screen improvements, and various stability and security fixes along the way. Flash Player 11 would be the longest lasting version of Flash, lasting 3 years, just like Flash Player 10. It's worth noting by this point, Adobe had begun to expand Flash beyond the desktop browsers, beginning with the Adobe Integrated Runtime, or AIR. This allowed for ActionScript 3 content to be compiled as a standalone program, as if it was a standard Windows or Mac program, complete with installation. This allowed for Flash to begin its reach into the mobile market, with Flash Player itself being available for Android starting in 2009, and AIR supporting both iOS and Android. Even AAA games were beginning to use Flash thanks to tools like Autodesk Scale4 and GFX, allowing for Flash content to be leveraged, especially in menus. Major games like Dragon Age Origins, Counter-Strike Global Offensive, and Grand Theft Auto V use Scale4 and GFX, showing just how popular Flash was by then. By 2012, it seemed absolutely nothing could stop Flash's momentum. Sites like Cool Math Games had legitimized its use in educational institutions even past strict proxy blocks, and tens of thousands of Flash games were being uploaded to portals like Congregate annually. It was a full-time job for many developers such as JMTB02, Edward McMillan, and Lightbringer777, some of the most prominent individual developers among the Flash game scene, with McMillan in particular becoming a full-on indie developer. Desktop penetration was at 99% of all web browsers, far surpassing every other plugin in this regard. Flash games even got into the mainstream media, such as The Office showcasing QWOP in 2012, an infamously tough Flash game starring an Olympic runner by the name of QWOP. Facebook used Flash to develop Farmville and Candy Crush Saga, 2 extremely profitable games grossing over $1 billion thanks to their use of microtransactions. The game Pandemic 2, released in 2008, would go on to inspire James Vaughn to create Plague Incorporated in 2012, a highly successful mobile and desktop program, though it resulted in a brief feud between Pandemic 2's developers and Vaughn. The genre of parody Flash games also reached a new height in the Adobe era, with McDonald's video games serving as a critique on the company's management and the fast food industry as a whole. Nicky Case's The Game trilogy satirized many elements of philosophical, political, and pop culture from 2008 to 2011. And of course, countless other political and cultural satire games became a thing on Newgrounds and other Flash portals. Even mainstream organizations got to Flash, most infamously PETA with a series of parody Flash games involving the Cooking Mama and Pokemon franchises from 2007 to 2013, where they were strongly criticized for missing the point of those franchises' content. Flash was everywhere. What could possibly happen next? Well, enter Steve Jobs, one of the co-founders of Apple. In the summer of 2007, Apple released the iPhone, becoming the first major smartphone truly competing with the desktop in terms of experience. With it came the Safari browser, the Mac's default browser as well. However, some early adopters realized a curious omission. There was no Flash player in iOS's Safari or any of the major plugins at all. As Flash was virtually ubiquitous on the internet at this point, it seems like a glaring oversight by Apple. Most figured it would just be added in a future version of iOS, as mobile Flash already existed just fine. But 3 years passed by, and there was still no iOS support when even Android got support in 2009 for Flash Player. Its market share had grown even stronger since then. What gives? That led Steve Jobs to write a very strongly written letter on Flash on April 29th, 2010, sharply criticizing the platform for its various stability and security issues, its closed nature, and poor performance on mobile devices, among other such complaints, and told the media that iOS would never support Flash. Ever. Use open standards like HTML5 if you want to come to us. Initially, journalists were puzzled on why Jobs was so bullish on the idea to exclude Flash, as while many did understand his reasoning, this was to lock them into Apple's walled garden for the App Store. However, by the end of 2011, more and more journalists began to agree with him due to Adobe pulling support for Android and Linux with Flash Player 11.2 in early 2012 for performance reasons, exactly as he outlined in the letter. As security updates became a regular thing with Flash, more people paid attention to the program's shortcomings, and a consensus was reached with the mainstream. Flash must die. But to the Flash game developers and fans, Flash did nothing wrong to them. Flash gaming was still popular as ever in 2013, with Flash Player 12 and ActionScript 4.0 on the way, and Air still supported iOS devices. The games were still getting millions of hits, and traffic wasn't going anywhere. It seemed like a lot of bio for what was just a web browser plugin. Besides, gamepad support was finally coming with AS4. Unity is exporting projects to us, and we're seeing a lot of potential with their content. The future looks great, but the angry backlash continued in the tech media, no doubt caused by many malicious advertisements powered by Flash, which led to the rise of ad blockers in 2013 and 2014, leading to the demise of Macromedia that year due to the lost revenue. Many Flash-related organizations and dev teams hid their roots with rebrands. Flash game licensing became just FGL, before folding in 2016 for one example, and even Adobe themselves rebranded the professional Flash program for animators to Adobe Animate in 2015. Even Flash game developers were occasionally being harassed for developing quote-unquote awful games. Adobe dropped AS4 from their roadmap as well, and Unity dropped support for Flash exporting. The arguments were working, as traffic for Flash portals, now beginning to branch out a little bit to mobile, began to decline starting in 2012. And it became apparent to sponsors that people were leaving, leading to a drop in revenue. Some developers just gave up working in the industry entirely, while others moved on to other platforms like Unity or other fields in the gaming industry. Still others, though, stuck with Flash, leading to some great later-life Flash games most of the Flash game fan holdouts enjoyed. HTML5, the replacement for Flash championed by the media, wasn't quite ready for prime time just yet until 2014, and YouTube switched to HTML5 for their videos in 2015. Still, there was a sinking ship, and by 2017, things were looking grim for the future of web games. By this point, Chrome had already dropped support for APIs other than Flash a couple of years prior, as all browser plugins ran on the same Netscape interface for plugins known as NP API, from Shockwave to Silverlight, as well as Unity Web Player, and OpenGL-oriented web technology that gained steam since 2011, when it was first introduced. However, Chrome dropped them all except for Flash in September 2015, but Firefox kept NP API for a while longer. Some people migrated browsers just to keep playing these web games, a true testament to the dedication of the web gaming community. Firefox wouldn't be far behind though, dropping the last of NP API, again bar Flash, in March 2017, and other browsers soon followed. It seemed all but inevitable that Flash was doomed. Finally, on July 25th, 2017, the day finally came. Adobe made the announcement that they would be discontinuing Flash Player support at the end of 2020. The news pleased a lot of tech journalists who had long called for Flash's death since 2011, but devastated the smaller but still active web gaming scene. Still bitter about the fall of Shockwave, Unity, and Java, all browsers began plans to block Flash content, if they hadn't already, and then remove it when the end of life came. Windows and macOS updates all but ensured it would be gone forever, banished to the software underworld on December 31st, 2020. However, a ragtag band of web game enthusiasts and archivists, led by Australian developer Blue Maxima, came together to form Blue Maxima's Flashpoint in January 2018, serving as an archive of Flash games to preserve for future generations. Blue Maxima was later joined by others worldwide to provide their support, now encompassing a custom launcher and a secure sandboxed web technology player. While initial momentum was slow for the team, the project picked up a lot of popularity as the EOL date for Flash approached in late 2019 and early 2020, with various news outlets covering the project in detail, along with the pressing urgency of game preservation rising in the years since. The scope later expanded beyond Flash to include all of the technologies and more covered in this documentary. And in fact, all of the captures in the documentary are thanks to this very project. By December 2020, the project had reached 70,000 games across 20 different technologies in its catalog, not to mention well over 8,000 animations, totaling over 500 gigabytes in all, and it is still counting up on both counts, even to this day. Other preservation efforts formed in the wake of Flash's death approaching, such as Ruffle, a Flash player alternative compiled in Rust, headed up by Newgrounds and a larger team, allowing for browser-based emulation of Flash games, including for the first time, Flash games on iOS. In November 2020, Ruffle and Flash games were added to the Internet Archive for in-browser support. Other large archives exist for download as well, though not nearly as extensive as Flashpoint. Some of the developers made archives independent from Flash, most prominently Ninja Kiwi, developers of the Balloons TD series, which put their entire Flash archive on Steam. A few developers even went as far as remastering the game so that they can be preserved in an enhanced form for future generations, such as 2020's Henry Stickmin collection. However, for many games, especially non-Flash games, Flashpoint remains the only way to play these games in the modern day. With the success of projects like Flashpoint, Shockwave games were able to live past its discontinuation on April 9, 2019. Java applets were able to extend beyond the fall of Java SE 8. Silverlight and ActiveX can be seen after October 12, 2021, and most importantly, Flash lives on beyond its supposed death of December 31st, 2020. It's all thanks to the wonderful memories these technologies provided to millions of people around the world, motivating them to preserve web games for the future. The rise of the internet brought the introduction of interactive technologies to websites to get them to stand out. Little did many of these companies know that they would kickstart new genres such as the tower defense game, the launch game, and the idle clicker game, as well as introducing a whole new development style to the gaming industry, the independent developer. For these reasons and many more, web games should always be remembered in the history of gaming. A whole legion of gamers and developers started on the web, thanks to those supposed time waster games. What other field allows you to do that?